Are you a man who's been told he's too sensitive? Maybe if somebody is making a joke at your expense, you took it personally and they said, hey man, it's just a joke, man, don't take it so seriously. Or maybe you stood up for someone else who you thought was being mocked and humiliated and you tried to intervene and everyone told you to back off, it was just a joke, nobody took it that seriously. And maybe even the person you were standing up for was like, hey, it's okay, I'm fine. Or do you have a hard time watching movies and TV where somebody's being humiliated or embarrassed because it just makes you want to cringe and look away, you just feel it too much? If that sounds familiar, this video is for you. Now, if you've been told you're too sensitive, like I used to be, you might have tried to be the tough guy instead. Or maybe you see these guys and you're like, well, that's not any better. Let's look at some ways in which tough guys are just as bad as the oversensitive guys. They just get treated differently. So the opposite of the too sensitive guy is the tough guy. But I'm going to show you some examples where you can see that they're really the same thing, just expressing itself in different ways. Let's start with criticism. There are times in life when we all have to deal with criticism. It might be a job review, might be when we had a disagreement with our spouse and they felt like we didn't treat them right, whatever it is. When we deal with criticism, a man who's too sensitive might take it as a personal attack, as something that's wrong with him, and it gets overwhelmed with emotions and doesn't know what to do with that. Whereas a tough guy responds to criticism as a blow to his ego and can get really aggressive and assertive in a really domineering kind of way because he's not open to the criticism and he's trying to protect himself. Neither of those responses actually really help you absorb the criticism and learn and grow from it. They're both responding in an overly emotional way. In both cases, the sensitive guy and the tough guy are both responding highly emotionally. They're trying to protect their ego. The sensitive guy is shutting down and not wanting to face that he needs to make changes. The tough guy is trying to assert his dominance to prove that he doesn't need to change, it's the other person that needs to change. Both are a way to defend your ego. But nobody tells a tough guy he's being too sensitive. He just avoids those kinds of criticisms by making it too difficult for people to criticize him. There are times in life when we all face strong emotions. When we go through breakups or job changes or any kind of grief, and a sensitive guy can get overwhelmed and become depressed and anxious and stressed out by those emotions because he doesn't know how to deal with them. And that causes him to shut down, whereas a tough guy suppresses all his emotions and doesn't cope with them at all because he's afraid of looking weak. And the funny thing is that this tough guy fear of looking weak is just that. It's fear. It's a strong emotion. This is both men acting in highly sensitive ways, just expressing it differently. The sensitive guy gets overwhelmed with stress and anxiety and depression because he doesn't know how to handle those emotions. And the tough guy bottles them all up until eventually they burst out. And we've all seen those kinds of situations and it's never good. Now, sensitive guys and tough guys also both run into serious relationship problems. And it's both rooted in the same sensitivity, but expressed in different ways. Sensitive guys tend to prioritize people pleasing. They like to make sure everyone around them is happy, and they have a hard time setting boundaries for themselves because they want to make sure that their partners, their friends, their family, their coworkers, they're all happy and satisfied, even if they're at their own expense. So they have a hard time setting boundaries. They sacrifice themselves and their own well-being in order to make everybody happy. That's people pleasing. That's what sensitive guys do. Tough guys, on their hand, have problems expressing intimacy. They may feel really connected to somebody. They may really like somebody, but they don't want to express it because they're afraid it's going to make them weak and vulnerable. So that's a fear of rejection. Again, it's an emotional response to something, and this prevents them from ever developing deep, intimate, fulfilling relationships. They might have service level relationships, codependent or unhealthy with lots of arguments and fights, or never have any deep, meaningful relationships, or they might have short one-night stands or short-term relationships, never developing anything deep because they can't get past that fear of rejection. So once again, you see this tough guy response of being tough and independent and not being dependent on anybody is actually an emotional response to a fear of rejection and uncomfortable emotional situations. So it's really displaying sensitivity in a different way. Sensitive guys tend to avoid conflict. They do this through people pleasing, through not setting boundaries, or even if they do set boundaries, not enforcing them, because they really don't like to have those conversations or face the rejection that goes with having a conflict. So they avoid them altogether. Whereas tough guys tend to almost look for conflict. Even if it's something really small, think about like a road rage incident. Somebody cut you off in traffic. This was nothing personal. This person doesn't know you, they're not going the same place as you, you're not in a race, But if it sets you off and you get angry and then you're gonna tailgate them and honk at them and flick them off and all these things, and we've all heard stories where this escalates and just terrible, terrible things where people get really hurt, that is an emotional response. So this tough guy is being extremely emotional. He's being really sensitive. He's just expressing it in a really unhealthy way. We also see this in guys getting so upset they punch holes in walls, where they don't know how to handle those frustrating emotions, that anger, and so they take it out physically and violently because they don't know how to handle those emotions. That is actually being really sensitive. They were just never taught the tools how to handle it, and so they express it in tough guy ways, which are typically violence, aggression, intimidation. Another way in which we see the similarities between sensitive guys and tough guys is in validation. So it's really easy to see in a sensitive guy where he's always looking for validation. He's always looking for a compliment. And it's that kind of needy behavior that really just makes people uncomfortable. Nobody really wants to be around it. So by attempting to get that validation, he actually pushes people away and doesn't get it. And so then he feels worse about himself. He seeks it worse. It becomes this cycle. The way tough guys or traditional masculine men try to express this need for validation is different, but it's still the same ego-feeding need for external validation. They do it through material possessions, through wearing brands or buying expensive things and bragging about their job or their income and spending money in very conspicuous ways so that everyone can see how well they're doing, because they really deeply care what other people think about them. It becomes just as off-putting as the needy guy. People don't really want to be around you. In both these cases, the tough guy and the sensitive guy, the people around them cannot see who they are because they're not showing that. So hopefully now you can see how both tough guys and sensitive guys are really both sensitive guys. They have really strong emotions they don't know how to deal with. They don't have the tools and the skills to handle these things, so they go about trying to fix them and handle them in unhealthy ways. Both tough guys and sensitive guys desperately seek external validation. They just seek it in different ways. They both are lacking in confidence. They just both try and compensate in different ways. And both tough guys and sensitive guys are way over concerned with what other people think of them. They seek that external validation because they don't feel it within themselves. They don't feel like they're worthwhile, like they're a good person, like they have something to contribute to the world. So they try and compensate by getting other people to tell them they're worthwhile. They just use different strategies. Again, same problem, different approaches to solving it, and neither one works. And ultimately, both the sensitive guys and the tough guys end up failing to have really fulfilling lives. They don't have deep friendships, they don't have deep relationships, they don't have fulfilling careers. It's just all surface level, and none of it is truly validating, fulfilling, or meaningful. Let me tell you why this is so important to understand. Because in both cases of the sensitive guy and the tough guy, you have someone who is really sensitive to emotions. And instead of finding healthy ways to deal with them, they're using unhealthy strategies to kind of just get by. And the reason they're doing that is because they were told at some point in their life that having emotions was weak, that they shouldn't do it, they should avoid it. And so they develop these unhealthy strategies. But here's where the lie is, and it is a lie. Having emotions isn't weakness. It's actually just being human. But highly sensitive men, you actually have a superpower that you've been suppressing. And just like any superpower, once it's fully developed, it impacts your life in every level. It helps you build better relationships. It makes you a strong leader that people admire and choose to follow, not because you have a title or a label or someone says you're a person of authority, but just because they know you have authority. They know that you're gonna do good by them, and so they're willing to follow you. You have better relationships because of who you are. It's not some superficial facade you put on, but the people you're in relationships with know you for who you are, and they really genuinely appreciate that. And a superpower is called emotional intelligence. I'm sure you've heard that word before. It's kind of a hot topic of the last few years, especially around men. A lot of men are dealing with the lack of emotional intelligence in different ways, but it's all the same root cause. You weren't taught the basic skills that you needed to learn, and now you're suffering because of it. And the good news is that you can learn it. It's not that difficult. It does take some work and some practice, but it can be done in a fairly short amount of time where you begin to see improvements in your life, improvements in your relationships, improvement in your career. And when I talk about improvements in your career, let's give you some real results, some real quantifiable things. One, men who have shown to have high emotional intelligence earn about $29,000 a year more than their peers. People with emotional intelligence are better negotiators. So whether you're negotiating where to go to dinner with your partner, or for a raise at your job, or a $1 million deal that you're putting together, having emotional intelligence makes you better at that. And one of the most overlooked benefits of emotional intelligence is mental and physical health. When you lack emotional intelligence, both the tough guy and the sensitive guy, they're super stressed out. They have anxiety and depression, and we know these things wear on the body. Whether you're talking about like high cortisol levels, hormones, and all that does, or your heart rate, or the inability to sleep, or not eating properly, or self-medicating with alcohol or drugs, these kinds of things are all terrible for you. But men with strong emotional intelligence, they have lower stress, less anxiety, less depression, and as a result, they indulge less in those negative behaviors, which improves their health. They sleep better, they have better blood pressure, they have better eating habits, they have better exercise habits. Men with strong emotional intelligence also are more confident. They know who they are, they know what's important to them, and they know that they're living in alignment with their values. Now that you know the benefits of cultivating that sensitivity, let's kind of look at what it really is. It's an acknowledgement that you have emotions, that you're feeling things. And it's empathy, that other people have emotions and they're feeling things, and you kind of can figure out what they're feeling. And that's a tool that is the most important social tool you're ever gonna have. It allows you to relate to other people, to build those relationships, to communicate better, and it impacts every interaction you have in your entire life with any other human being. Anytime you deal with another human being on any level whatsoever, this sensitivity is a tool you can key into to give you insights and make better decisions about everything you do from minute to minute in your life. Men are often told to not use this tool, pretend it doesn't exist, suppress it. And the result is depression, anxiety, anger, violence, rage, suicide, all these things. And it's because we're not using this tool. So if you're like me and you believe that men are good, and they exist in the world for a reason, and they have a good purpose to serve, then to be a good man, you have to use all the tools available to you. And that includes emotional intelligence. That includes this sensitivity that you were told to ignore. It's time for you to redefine what it means to be masculine and manly. You can have this tool in your toolbox and use it as you need. And when you feel those emotions coming on, when you have this tool, you won't get overwhelmed. You won't, because you'll have the tools to control that. And if you think about it, like all the men in the world that you truly admire, the most successful men, the men who have great careers and great relationships, who everyone likes and admires and respects, they are in control of themselves. They express happiness, they express sadness, they express depression, pain, anger, but they do it all in controlled, healthy ways, so no one is freaked out or uncomfortable around them. That is the power of true masculinity that embraces every tool at its disposal to get the job done. Men with good emotional intelligence have deeper support networks. Think about it. As a man, how deep are your friendships? Do you have a lot of male friends? And are they the guys that you can go to if you get heartbroken? Say you got broken up with and you get heartbroken. How many men in your life can you go to and tell them that this really hurts you? Do you have people like that in your life? Most men don't. And the reason they don't is because they lack emotional intelligence. So hopefully by now you begin to see the power of emotional intelligence and why it's so important, whether you're a sensitive man or a tough guy. Doesn't matter. Being able to express your emotions in a healthy, productive way, setting boundaries, telling somebody you're angry or upset by something they did or said without being scary or intimidating, these are skills that build confidence. When you can do that, it improves your relationships and it builds confidence in yourself that you can cope with whatever comes up. So when you have good emotional intelligence, you develop the courage and the confidence to express yourself and your emotions and your values and your beliefs and what's important to you in healthy ways. And the byproduct of that is it attracts people to you, people who like the same things as you, but it takes the courage and the confidence to stand up for yourself. That's a really important thing that you get from developing this emotional intelligence is you get these deeper relationships, but it takes courage and confidence to do it. And when I think about masculinity, like what I think of as masculine, manly man, courage and confidence are the two words that come up with. But courage and confidence are not always big bombastic displays. It's not always charging into battle. All right, so if you're a man who's been told he's too sensitive, who sees the problems it's having, it's time to stop denying your superpower and claim it. First thing you need to do is become more self-reflective. You need to actually dive into these emotions you're feeling and think about them, what they are, how they're affecting you, where they're coming from, what's triggering them, what are the causes, and how you respond to them, and whether that is a healthy way. Two great ways to do that is journaling and meditation, mindfulness practices. I encourage you to begin at least one of these immediately. Do them daily and take the time to really reflect, because self-reflection is the key. You have to begin to understand yourself before you go any further. That's the foundation of everything else. The next is expressing those emotions. Now, it can be as simple as saying, I feel this. It doesn't have to be a big display, but simply saying, I feel this. Or when you said that, I felt this. When you did that, it made me feel this way. That's a big thing, and that'll help you begin to create healthy boundaries, to have those conversations, to realize that expressing your emotions isn't weakness. It takes strength and courage to do it. That's what you get when you begin to self-reflect and then express your emotions. You begin to see changes. That's really where I began to see changes in my life. People started to treat me differently. They started to respect me more. I was afraid of being rejected. In fact, I got respected. That was mind blower to me. With that expressing of emotions comes setting boundaries. Boundaries are really simple in concept, but they can be scary to execute. It's saying, if you do this, I will do this. And then following through with it. This is where a lot of people fall down, is they make the threat that if you do that, you cross that line, I'm out of here. But then they cross that line and you don't leave. The boundary's no good. So when you set a boundary, it has to be something you are willing to enforce. And a lot of times people will test those boundaries because you haven't set them before. Once you've set some boundaries and followed through when they were violated, people begin to respect you more and they respect your boundaries. So when they stop testing them, when you say, I mean this, they know you mean it because now you're following through, which you didn't do before. Make sure that when you're setting boundaries that you're clear. Say, this is a boundary, this is the consequence, and then be willing to act on it. Be willing to follow through. Those are the three keys to setting any boundary. So the foundations of beginning to develop this emotional intelligence is self-reflection, expression of your emotions, and setting boundaries. And you can see they follow 1, 2, 3. It's a very simple process. Hopefully now you can see the benefit of learning this skill set, and I've just touched on the surface of it. You can see the problems it's causing you by not having it, and hopefully you can begin to see the benefit of learning it. Now I've given you some good starting points, but if you really want to dive into this, you need to get deeper. And this is one of the reasons I became a coach, because I went through this process myself. I struggled with a lot of these issues most of my life. I was a very sensitive kid. I got bullied a lot, and as a result, I kind of flipped it around, and then as an adult, I kind of became a tough guy and shut down a lot of my emotions. That hurt my relationships, hurt my career, and eventually I learned this stuff. And I became a coach because I want to share what I learned with other men, and I want to shorten that learning curve for you, so you don't have to go through the years of pain that I went through. There's a link down below where you can schedule a one-on-one appointment with me to figure out whether coaching would be a good fit for you. It's not for everybody. You have to be willing to do the work. I can only work with so many people at a time, and therefore I only take people who are truly committed in putting in the work to make a change in their life. If you can do that, I'll invest in you. So there's a link down below, click it, fill out the form, schedule the appointment, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon. Hopefully this has been really helpful to you. So click the link below, schedule your one-on-one appointment, and hopefully I'll be talking to you soon.